Hey, this is Katie. Today we are bringing you an episode from Loading Dock Talks, which is a show that we produce with Chef Preeti Mistry. But before we get to that, I have some very exciting Copper and Heat updates I wanted to share with you. You probably already noticed that our podcast feed got a little makeover. The rest of the Copper and Heat team and I decided that it was time to do a little refresh and update of our brand to better showcase all of the different types of projects that we're really passionate about. Since you're already listening to this, you probably know us primarily for this podcast, which we have renamed to Copper and Heat Radio. Though the name is slightly different, the podcast feed will be pretty much the same. Stories plated with care that explore the forces that shape our meals. Rachel, Ricardo, and I are also very excited to officially launch Copper and Heat Creative, which is our independent production studio. This is an expansion of our award-winning storytelling with a focus on helping chefs, brands, and organizations engage with food-curious audiences by producing unique and thoughtful content. Over the past several years, we have done a lot of different projects that we're really proud of, ranging from podcast production to social media content, recipe development, and in-person events. At the heart of everything that we do, across both Copper and Heat Radio and Creative, is our belief that food is a conversation. We tell stories that, like the best meals, challenge preconceived notions and delve into the forces that shape them. You can learn more about all of our work on our newly updated website, copperandheat.com. One of our absolute favorite projects that we've been producing over the last couple of years is Loading Dock Talks with Chef Preeti Mistry. We first met Preeti way back in 2020 when they were on an episode of Copper and Heat Radio. And when they tweeted out that they wanted to start a podcast, we got to talking and a very lovely partnership was born. We're just about to wrap up season 2 of Loading Dock Talks, where we asked each guest to provide us with a recipe that really meant something to them, whether it was a family recipe or something else. And then Preeti and I spent a week cooking all 9 of those recipes so that we could really dig in with the guests and use that recipe as a jumping off point to have some really deep and interesting conversations. The episode that we're bringing you today is about Barbacoa from Saqib Keval and Norma Listman, who own and operate the restaurants Masala, Maíz and Marigold in Mexico City. The discussion explores the significance of maintaining cultural integrity while innovating with traditional recipes, but they also go deeper into the broader responsibilities of chefs in society while touching on things like labor rights in the restaurant industry, creating a supportive work environment, and the importance of political engagement through food. So we're very excited to share this episode here on the Copper and Heat Radio feed. But go check out the Loading Dock Talks feed, which is linked in the show notes, to go back and listen to all the previous episodes of the season that we've produced with Preeti. We'll be back with a few more Copper and Heat Radio bonus episodes very soon.
I think what it means to be a chef, it needs to push for someone that has to push for change.
Welcome to Loading Dock Talks, where all the juiciest conversations happen. I'm Chef Preeti Mistry. In this season, we asked each of our guests to share a recipe with us, a family recipe or something they grew up eating, something that means something to them. And then I cooked all those recipes so we could talk with them about the ingredients, techniques, and the stories behind it all. In this episode, we're talking with...
My name is Saqib.
And I am Norma.
Chefs Norma Listman and Saqib Keval.
We are the chef owners of Masala, Maíz and Marigold in Mexico City.
Norma Listman was born in Mexico, and her practice as a chef and an artist begins with a deep investigation and research of traditional cooking methods and ingredients. Saqib was born in the U.S. to Indian farmers from East Africa. His food is an act of love, grounded in history and conveyed through flavor and craft. Norma and Saqib are partners in life as well as in the restaurants, melding the flavors of Mexico, South Asia, and East Africa into their cuisine. They shared their recipe for lamb barbacoa with me. Their version is based on a traditional recipe from Norma's family, met with a healthy dose of South Asian spices and aromatics from Saqib's.
I am from Texcoco, a small town in the outskirts of Mexico City, and we are known for our barbacoa. So I grew up eating barbacoa on Sundays with my family, with my grandfather, going to this beautiful place that has the dirt ovens, and you go and they open them and they pull out the barbacoa and you eat it right then and there. You make tacos, they sell salsas. Barbacoa is a dish that is very dear to my heart and to the memories of me and my family in Texcoco.
And in my family, my family are Indians from East Africa. I grew up hunting a lot in California, deer hunting, and also we had a farm between the families, so we'd also be butchering a lot of goats and sheep, and we would do these long cooking processes and they were large, communal meals where you'd roast legs of lamb or cook a whole goat and prepare it in a bunch of different ways, but everyone would come together to eat. When I first came to visit Norma's hometown, and she took me to this barbacoa spot that her family goes to, it felt so familiar.
You are losing your shit.
I was losing my fucking mind because it felt like home, but with some key differences. It was delicious. The cooking process, they were pulling lamb out of what easily could have been giant tandoors, but the process is different, but that's immediately what it made me think of. The act of everyone sitting together and picking up all these different components of your meal and sitting down and making tacos just felt so incredibly familiar. I think to talk about the recipe, we should give you a little context about our restaurant and how we cook. So Masala, Maíz, and Marigold, with the work that we do in the kitchen, we're looking at the migration of cooking techniques and ingredients and political movements between South Asia, East Africa, and Mexico. Basically, we're looking at why there's so many similarities, not just in our ingredients and cooking techniques, but also in the way that we, make the perfect bite, or the way we feed each other in our food cultures, and also the political movements that have informed those food cultures. I think the barbacoa recipe is a really great example of that because it's a cooking technique that exists in so many cultures, but it is so distinctly Mexican.
I think it's a recipe that showcases the limits that we give ourselves as chefs when creating a recipe, and how we use the name of the recipe and sort of the traditional techniques to make something new, but without crossing the boundaries of that recipe. For example, I wanted to put
yogurt in the barbacoa because in my culture, in like Northern South Asian cuisines, we marinate meat in yogurt, and I think it's a fucking perfect technique for marinating meat for long cooking processes. And I could not imagine cooking a lamb for so many hours and not marinating it in yogurt and spices. And of course, in Mexico, we don't do that here. It's not done. Barbacoa is not.
And that's where I put my foot down and said, it won't be a barbacoa. Then we would have to name it something else. And part of what we do is exploring new ways of introducing spices to a dish and sharing these ways of eating that are familiar for both of us. So yes, it was a yes to ginger
and to this like very rich masala that is rubbed on the lamb to cure it and then marinate it. But then she put the limit for the no yogurt. I still think the recipe would be a hell of a lot better with yogurt.
I cannot imagine a consommé with yogurt, because you have the barbacoa with the consommé, which is the broth that it's very hearty, that you drink with garbanzos, that you make with the juices that come out of this lengthy cooking process. And I don't disagree that it would be delicious. However, it would not be a barbacoa. And that it's a really great recipe that we developed. I think it's emblematic of the restaurant. It showcases how we experiment with food, but it's really good to showcase the limits and kind of like the way in which we start conversations around food in the kitchen and how we develop a recipe.
You make it sound so much more civil. There was a healthy dose of shit talking in this process too. I know.
Well, that was many years ago.
Yeah. I know I was going on and I was like, you guys, this civilization's been making barbacoa for so long, and how come you haven't learned about marinating in yogurt? What a lost opportunity. But this barbacoa, that's a collaboration of us, is very much Masala Maíz, and like you say, has these limits. And I think the limits is really important in the kitchen, especially when we're looking at this history of exchange between our respective cultures, because I think that's also what keeps us from falling into the trap of fusion.
Correct.
And where we're not putting shit together just to put it together, but actually putting the work behind it, doing the research, and really rooting ourselves in the cultural context and the language and the politics behind the different techniques.
And thinking about it in a very respectful way. And not just thinking, but like cooking it with respect.
Yeah.
There's so much in what you just shared. I wanted to ask about the yogurt, specifically around not wanting to be fusion. And, you know, something that has always been very important in my cooking that some people get and some people don't. To me, it's like always been about your intention and your thoughtfulness in what you do. When you're creating something new, that you give respect to tradition and you do things that are thoughtful and logical and not just try to like kind of smash everything together. So I was wanting to know, beyond the lamb barbacoa, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your philosophy around like the not fusion, but the philosophy behind your cooking when you are cooking from and drawing from a number of different rich cultures.
Well, fusion is a white capitalist gimmick. You know, it usually happens when white male chef goes to a country in the global south and has that experience of finding himself.
So
and
he
then
thinks.
probably does ayahuasca. It's in a beach somewhere and it's like comes back and it's like, I'm gonna put I don't know, something on a taco, or I'm gonna mix these two things and come up with this wonderful
Invented something
new, and you're like, oh my god, that's so boring. 1, 2 is so disrespectful, and 3, it usually only has a it has the final objective is to make money, and there's sometimes some chefs like to wash their brains saying that they are being respectful to their cultures, but they really don't know what they're talking about, you know, and they really have no context of reference for the culture, nor do they really want to do the work to get to learn those cultures that they are so simply and stupidly putting together. For us, the style of food that we do is something that has been done for hundreds, thousands of years. If, for example, if we talk about Mexican gastronomy and the history of Mexican gastronomy, we are a mash of so many cultures in one cuisine that, you know, if you study Mexican food, you understand that. If you study really the history of Mexican food, you can date what was happening in the country, who was coming, who was leaving, what was the exchange of those ingredients. So if you see recipes as historical documents, you'll see the mixing of people that has been happening for hundreds of years, and people who are moving, and it's what you were talking about earlier, and this mixing of culture that it's reflected through food when different cultures meet. And this is what's happening at Masala and Maíz. And by no means we are the first ones cooking South Asian and Mexican food. There's
a lot of history of South Asians and Mexicans coming together.
So that it's important to differentiate that for us, because we don't want to fall on the trap of being called fusion or being fusion. We're very intentional. We are respectful to the cultures. We have these limits. We were doing, for example, a pop-up in Chicago, and
one of the chefs we were working with wanted to make, we were talking about doing an idli tamal. No, it wasn't idli tamal. It was a dokla tamal.
Dokla tamal, yeah.
We were talking about doing a dokla tamal, and one of the chefs we were working with wanted to basically steam the dokla and cook it traditionally, like you would make a dokla, but not steaming it in corn husks.
And then just serve it in a corn husk. And I was like, no, you cannot call that a tamal. You cannot just use the plating look and call it a tamal. If we're going to call it a tamal, then there needs to be one, some corn component to it, and two, we need to steam it and fold it like a tamal, and then we can call it a dokla tamal. So those are the kinds of limits that we like to put, and those are the kinds of things that I think are very key to differentiate the work that we do from fusion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, what? How do you, because at first I was like, oh yeah, I've thought about doing that before. And I got all excited. Like, did you guys do it? Was it cool? And then, like, no, you can't just do that. That's not, I mean, for lack of a better word, I would say it's just lazy.
And I think one of the things that we anchor on a lot is in our work, and I know in your work too, Preeti, is that we talk about how food is political. And I think fusion does a lot of basically work to the contrary, to remove politics from food, because it still maintains the voice, the cuisine, and the lens of analysis of the global north. So fusion oftentimes is like centering some Eurocentric technique or some European technique with some component,
some other,
or an idea of the exotic other from the global south. I think there's a difference in communities of color that use the term fusion because we don't in English have the language for it, which we talk about a lot. But I think the other difference for us is we're centering two cuisines from the global south. And in that process, we're analyzing the power dynamics between our respective cultures, between these ingredient movements, between these migration histories, and using that very much in how we approach our food. Yeah. The language that we use is very important, like that dokla tamal is a great example, but one of the key words that we're focused on that we use to describe our food is called mestizaje.
And I think, before we go into that mestizaje, I think, and I'm going to jump in a little bit, not correct you, but add to what you're saying. I think that today there is a different dialogue, specifically speaking in the U.S. I've heard in a couple of different platforms the term third culture being used to refer to this idea of cultural mixing and the foods that come out of that. So I think that there are people thinking about this and exploring these ideas and owning them.
I want to totally also add to that. I think one of the things that came up that really sticks with me is this idea of like, our lives are not binary. They're not simple to explain. They're more nuanced than that. And to me, it was always something, when I was a kid, I always felt like, kids would make fun of you or, because you're different. And to me, I always thought, as much as it didn't feel good, like, I know these things are actually cool things. And I know that one day that, there's going to be people out there that are going to appreciate the fact that, I'm only 5 years old, but I've lived in 2 different countries and 3 different cities and all of that kind of, the complexities of being British and Indian and American, and which, is some of the experience for both of you is being also having this sort of third culture experience of like being able to go beyond that binary, which I think is what the fusion really speaks to, right? It's like, oh, we're going to take these two things and fuse them together. And I've often said, I'm not a fused person. Like, this is just my food. This is speaking from my experience. And so much of what I see in what the two of you do speaks exactly, Norma, to what you're saying there with this sort of third culture, which is, to me, I like the term only if it comes with the understanding that this is a nuance that is also different for every single person. Like, just because I say I can identify with that term third culture doesn't mean that it means anywhere near the same thing it might mean for either of you.
I don't think that even like a year and a half ago, I was listening to that. I feel like this is a term that it's new in food media and in food discourse that didn't exist before. I don't know that this will be the final term, but I am happy that there is something, because we've been exploring this idea for a while, you know, and now moving back to Mexico 7 years ago and having a fucked up term that it's mestizaje, that explains this colonial sort of approach to culture, but a blending of cultures. And we've chose to use this term because it doesn't hide that fucked up history of also how and why we are so mixed in Mexico and in other parts. But we would always have a really hard time trying to explain to audiences outside of Latin America what our food was, and we would have to always like have these lengthy explanations. And nowadays we have that. And I think exactly what you're saying, it's right. I don't think that even 3 cultures, it's enough, you know? Like some of us, it's like 4 or 5 or 6 culture, but it's a more general term that at least is open a little bit that conversation into a different, it is giving us a different spectrum of really food conversation that has been missing for a long time.
And I think you said something really important was also, we're using a language that doesn't hide the fucked up history behind how cultures mix. Like, it's not necessarily romantic, everything was great conversation, right? I mean, colonization is brutal. The forced mixing of people and the way that happened during colonization over generations is brutal. The destruction of indigenous culture is brutal. What we're trying to talk about is there's all of that. Yes, and we need to give that its space and talk about that trauma and look at how that impacted the creation of our respective modern day cultures. And then there's other mixing of people that are migrating for trade or business or family or love or just regular immigration. Or there's like the mestizaje that happened. We talk about this a lot, of the history of the Punjabi men and Mexican women in the Central Valley in California. Like, there's so many different types of cultural mixing that have happened over so many generations. And in the case of civilization as old as Mexico, like, we can't even trace it back far enough. And I really appreciate that Spanish has a word that can hold all of that complexity that's so broad and far-reaching and doesn't, like Norma said, doesn't hide the terrible parts of it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to ask you, while you're talking about cultures and all of this coming together, and so much of the food that you do, that you guys are speaking about, and also what I've experienced from eating in your restaurants, is like exploring migration and these different cultural food ways. And I'm wondering, you know, there were so many ingredients in your recipe for the lamb barbacoa, and we can't talk about all of them. Are there any particular ingredients that exemplify that ethos, or that you are really meaningful to you in particular?
Ginger.
Tamarind,
ginger.
Yeah, I mean, these are ingredients that, I mean, tamarind, I feel like links so many people together.
Chiles
too, of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
Honestly, so much of that recipe wouldn't exist without Mexican foodways and Mexican food history. Right? Mexico has changed the way the world eats. There's few cuisines in the world that aren't directly influenced by Mexican ingredients, or ingredients that have left the world from Mexico. And I think that barbacoa recipe is a good example of that, because so much of what's in the adobo, so much of like the chilies, all that stuff, like where the tomatoes, like we're thinking of that we start thinking about them as being like I think about South Asian food and I think about chilies and it feels so distinctly desi. And then it was such a mind fuck for me to think like, wait, no, this came from where? How did it get here?
They're not even Mexican.
They're not
Chiles
Mexican.
are not even Mexican.
Right. But they left for the world from Mexico.
From Mexico, correct.
Or corn, or like all these other ingredients exist in our cuisines that always like brings me back here, brings me back to Mexico and food history here.
And that giant connection that exists between Mexico and South Asia, because it's the same thing with spices, with cumin, with cilantro, we
All these ingredients that are
mangoes.
super Mexican, but came from over there. I don't know, in that recipe, in the barbacoa recipe, I feel like the tamarind brings it all together for me. How about you? You said the ginger.
To me, the ginger is, yes, a tamarind. And to me, it's tamarind and ginger what makes it distinctly different from our barbacoa. And that gives it a different depth without being hyper intrusive to the recipe. Because the meat still cooks the same way. Like if I eat our barbacoa recipe and I eat traditional recipe, yes, ours has like this complexity of flavors. However, it's very similar to the traditional way. I can still make a taco with the same ingredients and it's delicious. It's just more luscious in your mouth.
And then also ginger and tamarind have such a deep history in Mexican food. I mean, ginger and the history in Puerto San Blas, which is one of the first points of contact between Mexico and Asia, and how ginger entered the Americas from there.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So the masala, I mean, I think you kind of answered the adobo part with the yogurt controversy. The yogurt controversy.
I love it.
But I'm also curious. So we cooked it in the way you described. We put like a big heavy weight on top and wrapped it really tight, which I think really made a big difference. I braise lamb quite frequently, but I don't do that much to keep it all sealed in there. And also, we weren't able to find the maguey leaves, so we only use the banana leaves. I was just wondering if there was any sort of flavor or texture that we're missing. And can you describe that a little bit?
It tastes like agave. It's green and luscious and aromatic, and it's a big part of the final. To me, the difference between doing like a regular braised meat, and doing a barbacoa is the maguey leaves and what they do. Because traditionally, when you put it in this wood fire ovens, the maguey leaves prevents the meat from getting burned. They're like your seal. Think about them as a vessel, as your pot where they're going to be cooking them. They hold all the moisture and they impart their flavor. Sometimes they're sweet. They taste green to me. They're very aromatic, and it's a very distinctive flavor and smell that I think only if you've eaten, you get it a little bit. You get a little bit of that smell when you drink tequila or mezcal. You have a little bit of those green peppery notes that even though it's a specific type of agave that it's used for barbacoa, you get those notes.
It's so vegetal and so delicate and floral. At the restaurant, when we make it, after we marinate the meat, we cover it in avocado leaves and then banana leaves and then maguey pencas that we've roasted or boiled to make them malleable. And I love the moment when we unwrap the barbacoa, because you just get these layers and layers of lush flavors and smells, and it just fills the whole space. Like, I love that moment of right before you're about to serve the barbacoa, where you have this really heavy maguey aroma hanging in the kitchen.
Well, I mean, I didn't even have the maguey leaves, and I will tell you that our house smelled like barbacoa for a few days. And it was delicious. We're going to take a quick break, But before we get back to the rest of my interview with Saqib and Norma, I want to jump in and tell you about my newsletter. These interviews are edited down for the podcast because, me and these chefs, we could talk for hours and hours. So if you want to hear a slightly longer, unedited version, you want to watch the recording of the conversation and also get some behind the scenes content as well as the amazing recipes for all of these dishes, please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Now back to the interview. You both came to cooking from different paths that converged in the businesses that you now have together. I'm wondering if you can both tell me a little bit about your experience in the industry that led you to this current moment that you're in with your businesses and everything that you're sort of doing today.
Mistakes.
Yeah. Are you saying opening the restaurants for a mistake?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yep. I think anytime you open a restaurant, it's a mistake. I guess so my background, restaurant work was one of my first jobs, like for many people, and I stayed in it. Mm-hmm. But I was always doing other things while working in restaurants. So, not just when I was going to school and all that, but I had multiple jobs because fucking life is expensive and restaurants don't really pay well. So where I've really found my kind of inspiration in the industry was doing political food work and working on this project called People's Kitchen Collective, where I was trying to reimagine how a restaurant could function and what would it look like to decolonize the restaurant model. That was now 18 years ago, and that conversation, I feel like in the public has changed drastically over the last 18 years. But at that time, I was spending so much of my time trying to imagine what a new restaurant could look like, something that was more community-focused, more worker-focused, and really centralize the voices and experiences of people of color, of indigenous folks, of Black folks. And that I felt like has always been my push in working in the food industry in general, is trying to imagine a more just restaurant model. And I just love the restaurant industry. I love the act of cooking, and I love the act of being in service of something and having a place to critique and imagine new ways of existing and being able to put it into practice immediately. But yeah, I think that has been my background in working in it. I've been working in the industry for 20 plus years and have done all different types of jobs and all different types of restaurants.
Wait a minute, 20 plus? How old are you?
Yeah, 20 plus years now.
No, you didn't start at 15.
Yeah, no, it'd be less. It'd be 18 years.
So this is a lot of us giving shit to each other.
18 years now. Yep. The point is still the same. It's been a long time. 18 years. Look, the point's the same. I'm broken on the inside like all of us that have survived this industry. And it doesn't take that many years to make that happen. Anyway.
Norma, did you want to answer that? Or
yeah. So
well,
I came from a completely different angle to the food industry. I was working in art and fashion, and I did my last project in fashion. I was doing the custom design for this installation video project in collaboration with this Mexican artist. We were exploring the last 8 hours when California was still Mexico. And the angle was through food and recreating a feast. It was half historical, half fiction. A lot of research went down into this project, and basically when the bear revolt comes to Sonoma and takes California, General Vallejo, instead of fighting, throws a feast. And we recreated that feast at General Vallejo's house. And after that project, I switched careers. I decided that what I wanted to do was food. I never imagined when I went to school or, when I was choosing what to do with my life, that I wanted to do food. There was no such a thing in Mexico like that you could make a career as a chef. It was all like French restaurant with the long white tablecloths, and that didn't interest me. But then doing this project showed me the power of food and how through food you can tell the story of people and tell the history of people. And that to me was one of the most powerful moments in my life, and I decided to switch careers. And I had to make the choice between going to culinary school or not. I decided not to go. I talked to a bunch of chef friends, and they're like, there's two ways to do it. You can choose one or the other, and I chose to put my head down and start working in restaurants, and I did everything. And yeah, 20 years later, here I am. I found my vocación. I found my, how do you say vocación in English? I found my career, but more than my career is what I want to do with my life. I want to be around food. I want to feed people. I want to research food. I think it's powerful. It's interesting. It's political, and it is a way I want to live my life.
Yeah, I love that. I often say that cooking chose me. I really want to ask both of you this question because I'm really curious about your thoughts on this. What do you think the role of a chef is in our society and in our community? And what does it mean to you to be a chef?
It means a ton of responsibility. If you ask me, it means being responsible for 35 people in our team, 35 families. You know, it means showing up every day, being the best version of yourself that you could be at that moment. It means speaking out for the people that don't have the privilege to have the same voice that you have. It means fighting for the rights of the people that work with you, for the farmers. You know, I think that oftentimes the job is glamorized, you know, and everybody wants to be a chef today, but it's really hard fucking work, you know, and I think it should be taken more seriously in terms of using our privilege to create positive change in an industry that it's historically broken. Like this idea of the celebrity chef is dead. And even though there's a lot of media following the work that we do, our responsibility is using that as a platform to speak and to do change.
Exactly.
What do you think?
I think being a chef puts you in a really fucked up power dynamic, right? And it puts you in the position of holding a lot of power and privilege. And I think in any of these systems, and it puts at the pinnacle of a really historic system of oppression.
Yeah.
And I think when you are at the top and the beneficiary of a system of oppression, like any other system of oppression, it, like Norma said, it's a responsibility to use that for good. I feel like when there are chefs who are not actively using their position, their access, their privilege, their way of working, their kitchen, to push for change in the industry, then they are part of the problem, right? As a chef, if you're not actively working to better the working conditions in the industry or in the food system or in your community, then you're allowing yourself to just simply benefit from, like I said, a really fucked up system of oppression. I would love to see more chefs actively taking a stand and being more critical about the industry that's holding us up, not just the food industry, but food media in all levels, our restaurant culture, diner culture, because I think being a chef has to be approached as being a leader in your community, and you should take that responsibility very heavily and very seriously. Because like Norma said, you know, we're responsible for all these families, but not just them, but also like our neighbors and the people that we're feeding every day. And I feel like we take that very seriously, and I would love to see that more. Capitalism is really fucked up, and what it has done in the culture of celebrity is really fucked up, and I feel like what it's done to the restaurant industry in general. But a chef, that whole model has been fucked up since way back, since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be more vocal critique of that. And I think there should be kind of a call to arms amongst everyone that is taking that position, because the responsibility is really huge. I think what it means to be a chef, it needs to push for someone that has to push for change.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm going to use an example. I was visiting Mexico City in October and came to your restaurant, and the two of you just showed up at the end of our dinner because you'd been on vacation, that your employees bought you a vacation because they wanted the two of you to rest, because they thought that you were both very just burned out, which I thought was the sweetest, loveliest thing ever. Because I thought to myself, wow, what amazing bosses are Norma and Saqib, that their employees are like, go take a vacation. But no, on a serious note, I wanted to ask you, as we were just talking about, in terms of being a chef and the responsibility that we have as chefs when you're responsible for people, your employees, for their families, the community around you, et cetera. What are some programs or things that you have done that you think are different than how most restaurants run?
Well, I need to give you context of, we're talking about Mexico. We have a restaurant in Mexico City, not in the U.S.
Uh-huh.
We have a restaurant in Mexico City where the norm is that nobody follows the labor law. We have one of the most beautiful labor laws written today in our lifetime.
Written into the Constitution.
Yes, it's incredible. It was the first document of its kind in this world. It's that, to me, it's so beautiful and so inspiring. However, in Mexico, we have found a way to fuck it up and to not follow it and to pay bribes to really fuck up the workers. So if you ask us, it's a tricky question, because if you ask us what are a lot of the programs, and you might think like, well, that's basic, thinking about it from the US, but we start by actually following the rules. We start by actually paying people overtime, giving people vacation, declaring into the tax institutions exactly how much we're paying them instead of less, so they can get the right benefits for they pay.
Making sure that they all have health insurance. I feel like the basic stuff we do like that. That is, like Norma said, following the rules.
Another thing that to me it's huge that we do is we don't open at night. We decided to have a daytime restaurant. We know that we would make so much more money if we open at night, but we're stubborn. We have a theory of change, and we want to prove that you can run a restaurant in a fair, healthier way, and that it's doable, that it's also a doable capitalist business. Yes, our margins are tighter, but what this means is that everybody gets to go home at night, that the person, the latest person leaving the restaurant leaves at 9 p.m. We have a lot of single moms and single dads that can put their kids to bed. We have younger people that can go to school at night and can have a life, basically. And I think that the gesture that you're referring to was also a way of our team calling us on our shit and being like, you're not following the rules of your own game, which is rest and including rest. And you're really good about like having us have vacation, having us trying not to work overtime, and having our 2 days off, which is huge in Mexico. By law, people work six days a week. So another thing that we do in Mexico is at least give them the minimum, which it's 2 days off. And
one of those days is paid and tipped as well.
They're paid and tipped, yes. And we have to be in contextualize everything culturally. Again, if we do events at night, all of the people get to ride home in private cars. We don't let them go public transport, especially if they're women, because, you're talking about like the responsibilities of a chef earlier. And to me, one of the main things, it's to fight to keep the women in my team safe or safer or as safe as I can, because the reality is that they're killing us in Mexico, and nobody's doing anything about it. There's femicidios all the time, and we need to speak about it, and we need to do something about it. And that's something that we are very vocal, and that we have programs at the restaurant for education, for violence, again, like gender violence.
I think a lot of our decision-making process as restaurant owners is, and the golden rule in both businesses is that any decision we make first has to be at the benefit of the worker before it's at the benefit of the business. And we try to, through structure, like systematize how we caretake the working conditions, the living conditions, the experience of the workers through every level of our operations. Not opening for dinner is one of those ways. Yes, everyone would make more money, but then quality of life would go down for not just our staff, but also their families. Norma mentioned our theory of change, and that goes hand in hand with our collective leadership model and the coaching model that we use for every aspect of the business. We have someone that works as a team coach that does one-on-one sessions with everyone on both teams, but also does group sessions for the different cells of the restaurant operations. What we try to do is train people so that they can not just move up in the organization, but have more skills so that when they leave our group, that they know their labor rights, that they know how a restaurant should be run, and that they have the tools to open up their own labor and community-focused restaurant.
Well, it sounds like you set up a system and a culture of care. And I think that as much as, Norma, you say that most of these things are just following the rules, they are still rather radical in a way, even in the US. Definitely appreciate all that you guys are doing, especially, the one thing you said about not being open in the evening. I would say one of the biggest issues I have had when employing people, and especially employing a lot of women, but in general, just folks in general, is childcare. Not being open in the evening and how that affects people's families, I think is amazing. And I'm so happy that you're able to do that and still have a thriving business. As much as it could be more if you're open in the evenings. I want to keep talking to you guys and ask you so many more things, but we're running out of time. We have one last bit of the podcast. It's our lightning round. That's where I ask you lots of fun, silly questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. If you're both ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Go to hot dog toppings.
Bacon, cheese, and jalapenos.
Nice.
Relish, mustard, ketchup. Now that I live here, mayonesa, chiles, chopped onions.
Wow, the works for both of you. I love that. Let's say, what is a favorite meal that you like to make for your loved ones?
Mole verde.
No, now I'm just thinking of your quesadillas.
Grilled cheese.
I know, I love making grilled. I like to make, I love making grilled cheese at home.
What was a job you thought you wanted when you were younger? What did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
An anthropologist.
I wanted to be a politician.
You wanted to be president.
Yeah.
What is your fallback emergency meal? Like something, maybe for you, Saqib, it's grilled cheese. I don't know. Something you have to kind of quickly pull together.
Quesadillas.
Yeah.
Avocado tacos.
Yeah.
Right on.
Norma's quesadillas.
What makes Norma's quesadillas special? Something tells me.
They're perfect. There's technique.
Patience.
Beautiful. What's a little pet history? I know you have a beautiful dog, Sabina. What kind of dog is she? And then is there a history that you both have in terms of other pets in your life?
Yeah, we lost my pet Theodora, who's my cat of 17 years. We lost her last year. She was a queen of the house. She ruled the house. He is allergic to cats, but he sucked it up because she was first.
Yep.
And then Sabina came around 5 years ago and was trained by a cat.
So she acts like a cat.
She acts like a cat sometimes. She's very snuggly, very sweet, and she's a restaurant dog. She grew up here.
Okay, this is a difficult question, or maybe it's not difficult at all for the two of you, given that you live in the capital of this food. What is your favorite taco filling or style in particular?
Suadero. Crispy suadero.
Yeah. Suadero is a very particular beef cut around the side of the belly. The cooking process is normally confit and then chopped up and fried again in lard and then finished. I like my suadero taco like really hot. You have to eat it immediately. I like it with grilled onions.
And you're a red salsa. I'm a green salsa person. My favorite is campechano, which is half longaniza, half suadero. Oh, my mouth is watering, but crispy. I like not the suadero, but the longaniza needs to be nice and crispy. And the suadero needs to be soft, so you have that mix of texture. A ton of lime, salt. I am a green salsa forever person. And then grilled onions, that was a new thing. I started having the grilled onions, but they're not big onions. They're the cambrai. So the name is slipping. Yeah. The small, like spring onions.
Yes.
And they're sweet, and they just throw them in the plancha and brown them with all the fat of all the other meats, and then they put them in your taco. And
then what's your dessert taco? Dessert is like when you've had all your tacos and then you have one more taco for dessert.
I don't have. I have my dessert tacos usually campechano. Yours is cachete.
Yeah, cachete is delicious. Cachete is beef cheek.
That sounds delicious. I'm gonna make you a beef cheek curry.
Yes. Fuck yes.
Yum.
Please.
What is your first like wow food memory? Something that maybe was outside of the home that you tasted when you were younger that was kind of like the first time you're like, wow, like food could be like all of this.
Damn. I don't know my first food memory, but I've been craving dim sum so much, and dim sum for me is one of these like meals that always feels like circus. It's just like everything is wonderful and everything is anew. There's just so many levels to it. That's not my first food memory, but that is something that like good dim sum is always just full of wonder.
My favorite, there was this town where we used to go called San Lucas, and we would go to the yearly town celebration, and they made this tiny bean tamales that I used to love. They're like sweet and tender. Sweet as in the corn was sweet, but they were savory tamales, and they served them alongside with the mole. I didn't care about the mole. I mean, I love mole, but what I went for was those little tiny bean tamales. And that's one of the things that I remember as a kid, just like waiting for that time of year when we would go and stay in that small town with family friends, and the mole would be cooking in the fire, in a wood fire, in a giant pot that would probably feed 3 kids the size that I was. But what I really love were those little tamales.
Wow, y'all. This has been so lovely. We got to spend an hour together.
Yay.
Thank you.
A big old thanks to Saqib and Norma. We will be linking to where you can find out more about them and all of their delicious endeavors in the show notes. Thank you to all of you for listening. Please follow and subscribe to the podcast in your podcast app. And if you like what you hear, we would love it if you left us a positive review or you shared it with a friend. You can find me at Chef P Mistry on Instagram, Threads, and the app formerly known as Twitter. Shout out to the brilliant podcast and production music team, Copper and Heat.